live stream inside the Code Noobs Facebook group. What are you laughing at, Danny?
We just
Good
having the
Our
morning,
prior
funnest
Randy.
time
conversation.
right
I
before these
know.
Yeah.
things go live.
It's always like the moments before the start of this
And
that
then
are
it made it like
crazy.
really hard to get my brain to be like, what were we gonna talk about?
Oh man. Well, welcome, Randy, Danny.
What day and time is
Um,
it?
it is
Inquiring
Oh my
minds
Saturday.
are
God.
It
knowing.
is get this, guys, get this. It's February 1st,
Whoa.
2025. Holy crap. Did you ever
Groundhog
think you were
Can't
gonna
believe
Day
make
is
it to
tomorrow.
it is dang.
Tomorrow.
I gotta
wait,
go to
it is?
Punxsutawney.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
gotta watch the movie.
Oh
It's
my
a good
God.
movie.
I feel like I haven't seen that movie in a while, actually. Maybe I
So
should watch
good.
it.
I know. I
I
want to
feel
Maybe
like
I
watch
it
it
could
used to
again.
be on TV like every
yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like it was
On repeat.
Groundhog
It's
Day.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a
it's
good movie.
February 1st at 9:01 a.m. now. We are just getting into it. How are you guys doing this week? Did you get a lot of coding done? Did you hack into any mainframes? Did you, I don't know. What'd you guys do this week? Anything
Ah,
crazy?
hi, good. We got some coding done, messed around with some new packages like Puppeteer and stuff, and just kind of, yeah, had a good week. Learned some stuff, did some coding. Always fun, you know?
Very nice. Very
I
nice.
signed up for a really interesting looking course on hacking AI, and I started doing
Very
some,
cool.
yeah, AI learning modules on prompt engineering and intro to hacking, that type of stuff. So very
Very
exciting.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's amazing how much better responses you get too when you really do pay attention to your prompts.
it
Right?
is. Yeah, it is pretty amazing. That's one of the things, like, why I think people underestimate AI is because they use it in the simplest way possible. And
I was
then
just saying
they don't
that.
really realize, like, the power of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
actually, this week
Hey, Eddie.
there was the big debacle between ChatGPT and
Deep
DeepSeek
Seek.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and OpenAI crying that DeepSeek stole all their stuff and
So I
NVIDIA
thought this
losing about
I
half a
thought this
trillion
was
dollars in
interesting
value.
because I feel like it's the only time in history where the thing itself caused the thing to lose like 90% of its value. Like AI caused
yeah.
AI to
Yeah.
lose
Well,
AI's
Well,
that's
value.
gonna
that's what
happen though.
Like
Bryce
That's
it's
what's gonna happen.
Bryce
Yeah.
posted that. He was like, ChatGPT is the first AI to lose his job to AI.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, perfectly said. Like
Which is
I
right.
mean, that has got to be the most hilarious thing ever, but it's
But
true. Like
what's
it's
funny is
weird.
too, they're like, they stole our thing. It's like, and you guys stole everybody's content. So I guess it's
Yeah, like
fair.
it's everybody stole from everybody. All
Yeah.
right, guys.
That's the whole
Yeah.
model. We understand. It's
Well,
funny
what's
though.
interesting is like I guess the whole conceptual like market meltdown as a result is because people are just assuming they spent way less money to develop this than what all these companies were like hyping it up. Like, we need to spend millions of dollars on energy in order to have great
But it
AI
took longer.
models.
That was the thing. They took longer. And
Yeah,
these,
but
yeah, I mean, that's naturally the case, right?
yeah, but I mean, it goes to show you sort of the narratives that are passed around and how we as the consumer like don't always get the real story because the
Yeah.
idea here is that the CEOs of these AI companies like they're not going to come out and be like, "Yeah, our technology is going real slow."
Yeah.
Like they come at they're hype mans for their
Yeah.
own com- companies. Like that's what a
But
CEO is. They're a hype man. So like they're like, yeah, we're building the latest and greatest, and it's gonna, we're gonna do amazing things, and we need all these chips. And all of a sudden, like people realize, like maybe we don't need to, like maybe Nvidia's
300,000
not
NVIDIA
worth as
chips.
much. Yeah, like
Yeah.
maybe it's not worth that much because we don't need
Well, it's good
that.
because they're not cornering the market anymore.
No. And you
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
need,
something
there's
called
competition.
competition.
yeah,
Yeah.
that'll actually
There's
make
like
it, it'll make
healthy,
it better and
and
cheaper, right?
of course,
And
now we're like, no, 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 no. We can't. They're Chinese. Sorry, guys. No,
yeah,
Yeah.
no.
they're
We
gonna
can't.
ban it,
They're
right?
bad people. They don't like competition,
It's
so we
funny
can't
too.
have them.
I remember reading it was like when ChatGPT 3 had first come out, there was an MIT guy who wrote a paper that was he was talking about like the speed at which they're able to train these models with
Yeah.
the current tech. And he was saying like, I think it was something like I forget the exact numbers, but if ChatGPT say costs like 100 million to train, he was like in 5 years training a model like that will cost like 10 grand. Like it'll get so much
yeah,
cheaper, and that's what's going to happen. And so it's going to get cheaper. They're going to figure out new ways, and that's good though. You want
yeah.
competition. It'll make it all
I
better.
mean, ideally, they want like I think the overall thing is to find a way that you can train on sort of fresh data that's been sanitized without, because I think that's the
Yes.
most expensive part is
Yeah.
like obviously the cost of training, but also the data set costs a lot of money to get like people to sanitize a data set for you. So
I
They
was
take
just
a lot
thinking
of time too.
if you trained your AI on like trolls on Reddit, just like
they did that. They actually did that
That was Twitter with
with
Microsoft.
Chat GPT, and it
Oh yeah.
very quickly degraded into like bad, like really
yeah,
Yeah,
bad.
real
There's
bad.
some stories about it. You can look into it. Yeah.
yeah.
Microsoft tried that once, even before ChatGPT was out, that they released this. It was like a Twitter bot that was AI, and
Yeah.
it was supposed to be like, I think it was like a teenage girl or something. And within like hours, she was saying like, it was saying like Hitler's great and all this horrible stuff, and they had to take it
So
down. And
crazy, dude.
yeah, because
Yeah.
like, but that's been their major problem, is how do you train on,
Yeah. How
concurrently
do
as you're
you
going
prevent
without,
hackers from messing
yeah,
with
destroying it.
what you create? Yeah. Well, good
What's up,
morning,
Chris?
everybody in the comments. Nice to see y'all here. Chris, Eddie, Dan Garrow. Nice to see you here in the comments.
Bryce, good
Hey,
morning.
Bryce. Good morning. Well, I mean, I guess we might as well get into it. So, since it's a new year, it's now a month into the new year. It's why not
Everybody's giving
just,
up on their resolutions. Now
yeah,
we have to
everyone,
figure out a
all
new
our
plan.
resolutions are thrown out the window. So now we
The
need some
gym's finally
actual,
quiet down.
yeah, we need some actual plans, some actual habits that we can build for to become web developers in 2025. Because I think that's, the idea of most of the people in this group is you guys want to become amazing web developers. So I think in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what we would do if we were starting over, what path we would take, and how to make the most out of your journey here. And I want to start with this. Actually, speaking of the gym, I was at the gym yesterday and I was doing my Stairmaster, and I like to, be on the Stairmaster, listen to some music.
I
And
thought
then
you
I
only
also,
did like jazzercise.
no,
Water
Stairmaster.
aerobics. Water
Stairmaster,
Zumba.
water aerobics, jazzercise, and bridge, the
There
card
we
game.
go. There you go.
It's exercise for your fingers.
It's South Florida.
Yeah, it's South
Yeah.
Florida. I mean, what do you expect? It's like me and a bunch of old people. Anyway, um, I forget what I was saying now,
Sorry.
Danny. Thanks.
You were
It's
talking
horrible.
about the gym.
Oh
You
yeah, I
said
was at the
something about
gym and I
gym.
was like, I'm gonna read something, and so I reinstalled the Kindle app and I went on there to see what books I had, and I had this book called Ultra Learning, which I had read a while ago, but it's actually a really great book, and it talks about this guy who
Zumba.
Zumba. Yeah, I like Zumba
I
too,
forgot
Chris.
about that.
Zumba's a good one, and yeah,
Remember when speed
um,
walking was a thing and everybody used to walk down the street swinging their arms like
yeah.
crazy?
With
Yeah,
like
sorry.
ankle weights and stuff off.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, so I started reading that Ultra Learning book, and it brings up a good point. In the very beginning of the book, he talks a little bit about how he got into Ultra Learning, and it was to learn languages at first. He met this guy who was doing this challenge where he would travel around the world and live in a place for 3 months and try to become completely fluent in that language after just 3 months. And the way that he did it was like complete immersion. So most people think of immersion as like you go to a country and you just like live there and that's great. But the strategy he used was complete immersion, meaning he lands and he doesn't speak English at all. Like he doesn't give himself the other option. And so I think,
That's a really good idea, though, especially if, like, that's, I
yeah,
think, the emphasis on projects we always talk about. That's the idea, right? Is to
exactly. And
just
that's
do it.
sort of how I wanted to bridge it is I think a lot of people, when they first get into development, they see it as sort of this casual activity of like, I'm going to take, like, dip my toe in the water and like get a taste for what I like. And they end up spending a couple years, many people, like, including myself, I know you guys too, spend a couple years sort of just wasting time, not actually focused on learning diligently, right? Like, you're just sort of like, oh, I'll play around with this Udemy course for a little bit, or I'll like make this
Let me
little
learn
Python
data
script.
Yeah.
structures in every programming language on the
Well,
face
you
of
Yeah,
know,
the earth.
I
yeah.
think
I
I
mean,
think part of the problem is too is there's not a lot of good resources out there that can give you a clear path of like what should I learn? And when I know
yeah,
for us, like I know for me, and I'm sure for you guys, like when we got back into it, like coding like in the late 90s, like when I had first tried it, like was so different. There was just so few languages, so few frameworks,
Yeah,
so
there was
few
like a
yeah,
handful of
yeah.
languages, and that was
And
it.
now it's like insane. So it's like there is this sense too of like, oh my God, like what do I focus on? Like, am I picking the wrong thing? And then like that feeling of like you have to master everything before you move on is a mistake, I think too,
yeah.
that also holds you back.
Yeah, I think that's a huge mistake is that there's some level of readiness. I actually started putting
Some threshold that
together,
you can actually cross, yeah, that you're like ready.
yeah, it's interesting because I started putting together an ebook yesterday that I thought was important. It's called like the no code guide to making your first $1,000 as a web developer, right? Because I think that's ultimately a lot of people's goals is to start making money in this field as quickly as possible or just like transfer into this field. And I feel like that's the easiest way um, to like feel like you're actually in this field is by making some money. And so it is really important to just like take that action and start acting like a web developer as soon as possible. So
Yeah.
really, to start us out, I want to get an idea from you guys of what you think are the most important things to learn from the very beginning. Like, let's pretend I am completely brand new to web development. I have never learned a minute of HTML or anything else. Go ahead, Randall. I see your two hands up.
All right. So before even getting into web development, because so many people get into programming because they want to make money and they want
Yeah.
to get a job. And so I've been refining my prompting on ChatGPT. And
Mm,
one of the things I
they
wanted to
call
find
him the
out
prompt
is that,
king.
in terms of jobs, what languages have the most jobs out there? And it
Mm.
turns out that JavaScript has about 1.5 times as many jobs out there as Python.
They
And
should call it
JavaScript,
JavaScript.
exactly. Yeah.
JavaScript.
Yeah. But it's the
It's my
highest number
zinger
of
of the
jobs
day.
out there.
That was good.
Yeah. It has, I forget the exact numbers, but yeah, it
Well, it's
has,
the widely used. It's the most widely used
Yeah.
language now. It is
yeah.
like number one.
So if you're getting into this to make the money, it would make sense that you'd go after the largest target, just because
Yeah.
that'll give you the best chance to make the most money. So even before sitting down and thinking, well, what language do I learn? Do I learn Go? Do I learn Haskell? Do I learn? It's like just follow the money, and the
Yeah.
money's in JavaScript.
Yeah. I
Well,
would say this too. I think you make a great point about follow the money. The other thing is that if you look at JavaScript, it is the most widely usable language, right? Like you can use Ruby on Rails or Go or Python or these different languages, but you can only really build like one part of a web application with them typically. Whereas JavaScript, because it's, the web language, the first web language, it's used for both front end, back end, and you can write scripts with it. You can basically do pretty much everything, and all of documentation is written in JavaScript usually. So it's
yeah.
one of the easiest ones. And I think one of the things, like, one of the reasons why we see JavaScript, uh, being so proliferated in like job search is because there's so many things built on top of JavaScript, right? It's not like most jobs are not looking for like,
Well,
do you know JavaScript? They're looking for, do you know React, Next, Angular, Vue, all these
that
different
yeah,
things,
and
but
that
they're all
changed.
built on JavaScript. So if you understand it at the core, you should get all of that.
That's
Right.
also because we don't build software anymore. We build web apps. I mean, that was
Right.
the major shift
Exactly.
in like, and that started what, like not even that long
Not
ago. Like
2001.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, like, like as soon as they could though. Like now it's become like you don't download software on your computer that's like sitting on your computer only. It's web apps that use APIs and stuff, and that's where
Yeah.
JavaScript also is used so heavily. So everybody needs it at some point in their project,
Mhm.
even if they're using a lot of back end, you need JavaScript. So yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way to start.
So here's
Yeah.
another thing. So I took a look at the numbers now, just because I think it's really interesting. So
Yeah.
31% of job postings are JavaScript,
Yeah.
20% are Python, 18% are Java, 12% are C sharp, and 10% are PHP. And then
Where's
every
COBOL?
other language, because yeah, every other language is the rest of that. But that's something worth really considering, because those five languages alone, JavaScript, Python, Java, C sharp, and PHP, that accounts for 90% of jobs out there.
Yeah.
So if you're
Yeah.
learning something other than that, there's a good chance you're wasting your time.
Yeah. And
I also wanted to add something too with the
go ahead.
learning
Yeah.
though. Yeah, I want to say like I think that's a really good point is figuring out like what has value to learn in the first place. Because I think that's where we got stuck too with the boot camp was they just dump everything at you and then you feel just as lost as you
Yeah.
did before, right? And I think the other thing too is like if I went back and started, if I was talking to somebody for the first time, like if you start with HTML and CSS because they're easy, because there's like a correlation. And yeah, CSS can get very complicated, don't get me wrong, like you can do a lot with it. But those you just need to know how to read it and how to look stuff up and then move
Yeah.
on. Like, don't spend
Yeah.
a lot of time on HTML and CSS, maybe like a month at most on both, and then
Well,
just
actually,
move on to the next
we were
thing.
talking about this because we wanted to give people like a very easy, actionable plan. So learn HTML and CSS. One of the best resources that we think is the book by John Duckett, the HTML and CSS book. It's
Yeah.
a brown one by John Duckett. It's
Very good
illustrated
one.
with colors in the middle. It's follow along with everything, and
You
you
also
can
have
learn everything you
MDN
need to
too.
know.
Web3 or the Web3 schools, MDN are both really good resources for HTML and CSS as well. There's a ton. I mean, there's literally
Yep.
a ton of good resources. Yeah.
Yeah. But you follow that one book, and you'll learn everything you need to know about HTML and CSS.
Yeah. There's a JavaScript and jQuery one too, which is really good. But
Hmm.
I've actually been reading the JavaScript crash course by No Starch Press, and that is an excellent book for JavaScript.
No
Um,
Search is
but
awesome. They do really good coding books. I am always impressed by them.
yeah, I want to mention one other thing because I can hear in the comments Bryce saying somewhere, but Python's
Python.
so good. I love Python. Like I can just hear him, right? And so I want to because you had made this
Python,
big
Python,
point.
Python, Python.
But
Yeah.
he
Because,
likes data
no.
science though,
Python,
and he
Python,
likes. I mean, that
Python,
makes sense for
No,
what
no.
he's interested in.
I'm
Yeah.
just messing with him,
Yeah, I know.
but I can like what I'm really trying to get at is you made this big argument about like okay, we should learn JavaScript because it's so much of the market, but the sort of like contrarian view would be like, well, if everybody's going for JavaScript, I should learn something else because that'll set me apart, right? Because I'll have more job opportunity because less people are learning Python or C or whatever it is. And I want to make this argument against that. And this is why. I don't have any problem against with Python. I think Python's a great language. It's a great beginner language too because it's very readable. Um, but in terms of finding a job, yes, you can make that argument. But when you're a junior, what you want to do is learn as quick as possible. And you really want to focus on learning the big ideas and not necessarily all the tiny syntax that you may need to learn. And
Yeah.
so by learning a language like JavaScript that's more prolific, has more information out there, more examples, more use cases, more libraries, more things built on top of it, you actually enable yourself to learn faster. And so I think JavaScript is the right place to start for junior developers. And all these other languages you can pick up very fast once you understand JavaScript because you already get the bigger concepts. Go ahead,
Well,
Danny. What do you want to say?
that's just it. Like I started with Python, but you can learn once you know a language, learning another one's very easy. If you stick with
Yeah.
one language and learn it, learning another one is
Yeah.
not hard, especially if you understand the larger concepts, like you said. I think that's the more important thing is understanding how this stuff connects, understanding the larger concepts, because then you know what to look for anyway, and it makes it a lot easier moving forward. The other thing I was going to mention too is with JavaScript, the one thing I would say in favor of it too is that a lot of the other languages, it's going to be harder to build full projects by yourself. And
Yeah.
JavaScript will
Yeah.
enable you to do that. So like even as one person, one individual, you can make a very, very impressive web apps,
Yep.
complicated, complex projects, and it'll get you off the ground a lot faster and get you to that place where you're not just a junior developer quicker. And
Yeah.
that's where you want to be.
I also want
Well,
to
you
say this,
both.
like I feel like there's zero things about JavaScript either that will sort of handicap you. Like, if somebody were to make an argument like, well, I want to learn C++ because you can't do this in JavaScript, that doesn't really exist. There's very few cases where that's the truth. So like there is no advantage to learning C++ necessarily before you learn JavaScript if you want to be a web developer. If you're like, hey, I just want to develop software for some company, then maybe C is the right place to go. But go ahead, Randall. Were you going to say something? Or are you reading Bryce's
Well,
I
comment?
agree with
no,
you,
no, no.
Bryce. Yeah, no, he's right. I mean, it's about your interest, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, Python's very much used in research, AI, that kind of stuff
Yeah,
back
and
in
that's what I'm saying. Like I love
data
Python.
science.
Don't get me wrong, but for people who want to become web developers, like it generally is easier for you to start with JavaScript. Now, the idea
Yeah,
here again is that once you make this commitment to becoming a software developer, your learning never stops. So once you've learned all of JavaScript, then you should move on to learning Python or Ruby or any of these other languages, right? Because they just make your developer toolkit that much more expansive and give you more
yeah.
job opportunities, more opportunity to make money, make cool things. So, yeah,
So you both of you mentioned that JavaScript is important for junior developers, and I think this needs to be highlighted because there is no more junior developer anymore.
No.
Ever
correct.
since AI came out, junior developers are gone because
Yeah,
everything that a junior developer would do can be done in AI 100 or a million times faster. So
yeah,
this is where learning JavaScript is essential because you once you learn it, you start freelancing. You start doing work on your own until you become that intermediate, middle level to senior level developer, and then you can get a job at a big company because no company is going to invest in you. Companies just don't do that anymore. There's no
No, they
trust
don't.
anymore between companies and people
yeah,
anymore. I mean,
They're
especially
too
in
worried about their
technology,
stock
you're
going up 1/4% that they are not going to waste time on
yeah.
3, 4 years training someone. They don't care.
And like
Yeah.
yeah.
nowadays, it looks good if you only work at a company for like 3 to 6 months, which is absurd.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's just the way that things are going. So you really need to develop yourself early on. And with JavaScript, it's great because you can go out there and you can do that. You can
Yep.
build a ton of websites.
The other thing I wanted to
Yeah.
mention too, and I think this is important that people forget, is like, I know it sounds scary that there might not be a lot of junior developer positions out there, but I actually think it's beneficial to learners because if
Yeah.
you build stuff on your own by yourself first and you do that freelance stuff and you learn how to build a whole project, your understanding of the entire ecosystem, it gets broadened and you become a
Yeah.
much better developer. You also learn how to problem solve way better on your own because you're stuck figuring things out by yourself. And so, like, yes, like at first your code might not be the best or whatever, but you figure this stuff out as you go and you'll be stronger and stronger moving forward. So you'll be a much more valuable hire too, I think.
And there's no
Yeah.
competition. Like that's the crazy thing. There's no competition because all of these schools and everything is churning out people with like, you know,
Don't know how to do anything.
documentation coming out of their eyeballs, but they don't know how to build anything. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if you actually put it to practice and you start building stuff, there's no competition. Everybody will want you to do it because you can actually produce stuff.
I
Yeah.
know that's what's funny. I was thinking about that. Our boot camp never showed us how to go from start to finish on anything.
We didn't have a
No.
Anything.
single completed project.
No.
Well,
No.
also like 99% of any of the code that we wrote was copy and paste too.
Yeah.
So the idea of a boot camp is not actually to educate people, it's exposure. It's not like the idea is not like, hey, you have an understanding of how to do this. It's like, hey, we showed you what SQL is and we showed you what like how to spin up a Microsoft Azure instance or something. Like it's not
Yeah.
designed to be like, hey, you're actually a developer, right?
Well, you know what's funny too is like that's also true with college, right? College is going to focus more on the theory than it is actually on practice. And so that's why you see a lot of kids come out of college too with software development or computer science degrees that can't code and can't do a whole project
Yeah.
by themselves. Like they don't
Yeah.
know how to.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's say someone's been following along. They read that book by Duckett, HTML and CSS.
Hmm.
They read the JavaScript crash course. What do they do next?
Yeah. I want to run through like actually all of that just over and then sort of continue from there because I think we can add to that. So like the Duckett books are incredible because they're going to break down HTML and CSS in very simple forms for you. What I would suggest for junior developers is you really don't want to spend too much time on HTML or CSS or really JavaScript until you move on. You just want to get like foundational understanding. So for HTML,
So that's a good point too,
you
because you're going to keep learning it as you go anyway.
right,
Once you
you're
move on
going to
to
keep
frameworks, you're
getting
just going to
more and
keep
more
reinforcing that
exposure.
knowledge. Yeah.
Right. So for HTML, you just really want to understand the basic formation of HTML tags and elements, how to create them, meaning like self-closing tags and tags that have like two, right? An opening and closing tag, how to actually write them, what attributes are, right? Like how to add an attribute to an HTML element, and then what are the different elements, right? And then how do we structure like an actual HTML document using those elements? I think that's, if you get those concepts, that's like basically all you need to understand for HTML to start. CSS, same idea, is like understand how you write a CSS document, like how you formulate the actual text on the page, what is a property, right? And how there's sort of key value pairs for properties. And then from there, you again just want to get exposure to like what properties are available. Like I think Eddie's watching and he was talking about how he was racking his brain over like learning CSS. And I think everyone does that in the beginning. They're like, I need to learn every CSS property out there so that I can be a design
Yeah.
like, expert when I'm developing websites. The truth is you don't need to memorize all of them. You just need to understand like what you can and cannot do. Can you round corners? Can you change text color? Right? Once
You
you
can
have
look
an
it up.
understanding, you
Yeah.
can just look it up and be like, how do I change text color? And again, with doing this over and over, your brain just picks up on those things instead of having to go to a website to see like, you know, how to round a corner of a box or something. You just do it, right?
And
You
there's
just like
very
border
few things like,
radius.
yeah, and you get used to it. It becomes second, it becomes like muscle memory. And then there's a few
Yeah.
things that you'll always need to look up because you use them very rarely. Like there's very few
Yeah.
cases where you use certain things that you'll just look them up when it happens, but you know how
Exactly.
to
Like
use it.
you're,
That's all that matters.
you want to build custom animations. And this is what you were talking about too, Randall, is you don't need to be a junior developer anymore. Like the junior developer would look these things up. You can literally just go to ChatGPT, and if you describe an animation well enough, it will just write the CSS for you. Like
Yeah.
very powerful tool to have as a developer, right? So that's what I would do for HTML and CSS. And then the next thing would be JavaScript, right? The next obvious like thing to learn is JavaScript. And for learning JavaScript, I honestly would highly recommend JavaScript Crash Course, the No Starch Press. It's one of the best books that I've personally read for learning JavaScript, not because it's like everything. Again, it doesn't need to be comprehensive. The idea here is you get the core concepts of these languages and then you build on them over time. It one sec, Nettie. So
Yeah.
it provides all of the information that you need to do 99% of things with a website. There are some things that it misses. And like, if you compare the definitive guide to JavaScript to that book, they're, one's 2 to 3 times thicker because there is so much you can do with it, but you just need the basics. So that book teaches you basically everything about JavaScript that you need to understand. And then it has some really great projects in the back that help reinforce that learning. So
That's
that'd
what I
be
was
the
gonna
next
say
step.
was,
What are you
yeah,
gonna
because
say?
like
Yeah.
I did the Python crash course and they're structured the same. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, they're great books for that reason. If you do all those projects, you'll have a very good
Hmm.
understanding and you'll know enough. And then, because really the idea here too is moving on to frameworks as quickly as possible because that's
Yes.
what's being used today. People are not coding in vanilla. You might need to use vanilla here and there for very specific cases, but for the most part, you're going to be using frameworks because you can get the job done so much faster and
Yeah.
better. And I think that's the important thing. So, and I think that's what people are scared of. They're scared of getting into these frameworks like Tailwind for CSS or Bootstrap or like, Next.js, stuff like that. But the reality is you keep learning as you go with it too. And you just get
Yeah.
more and more comfortable with these tools that are going to be used for the rest of the time that you're working on this stuff. I mean, until
Yeah.
something else better comes out, I guess.
I think
Yeah.
part of that
So
is due just to the word framework. It sounds scary.
Yeah.
It sounds like
yeah.
scaffolding or some giant construction thing, but all a framework means is modern JavaScript
Yeah.
Yeah.
because that's
It's really
essentially
all
what
that
it
it
is.
is.
It's just
Yeah.
modern JavaScript. Whereas when you learn JavaScript from these books, you're learning vanilla JavaScript, which is essentially old JavaScript. Nobody writes
Yeah.
languages. Nobody writes anything in that anymore. They just use
No.
modern JavaScript, which we call
Yeah.
frameworks.
There's this thing that I think about a lot, which is kind of interesting when you spend some time thinking about this is like in JavaScript, there's only really a handful of rules of things that you can and cannot do and the way that syntax is designed to be created. And like everything that you use on the internet is built off of those very basic concepts of like, you know, something like Boolean values or like whatever, like these very basic core concepts of like what are the variable types, how can you create functions, right? and everything's just built on that. That's what frameworks are. They're just more JavaScript that's running in the background that makes developing websites easier, right? But there's a slight learning curve. So the framework is, you have to learn how to use it first. But once you know how to use it, it makes everything you want to do in web development that much quicker and faster and easier. And I can give one basic example, but when you want to do something with, something on a page in JavaScript, you have to get an identifier, right? So you do something like document dot get element by ID, you assign that to a variable, and then you can do things like add event listeners or whatever to that variable. That's all possible in JavaScript, and that's great. Like, it's the power of JavaScript. In a framework, you can do that with like multiple less lines of code, right? So you, instead of
On the
like,
same page, on the
right,
same page
and
of code too, without having to
exactly,
go anywhere else. Yeah.
and you can add like your styling on that page, all these different things. So it just empowers you as a developer to do that much more. One other amazing thing about these frameworks is that they use NPM, which is a package manager, meaning that you can very quickly and easily inject some other developer's code into your code to do some function that you need. Like, hey, you want to make a spinny wheel that like, selects a random number or something like that. Cool. There's somebody who already built that. So you don't have to spend hours actually coding that out.
Actually, you know what? That's a good
Good.
point too. It's like I think one of the misconceptions people have when they get into this is like they have to do everything themselves. And that is
Yeah.
actually like the wrong way to think about this. It's not saying that you
Yeah.
should just use packages for everything, but you should use the technologies that exist out there wisely and smartly to make your job easier and to improve your efficiency over time. Like it makes no sense, like you said, like if you need a spinning, it makes no sense to code that whole thing out when there's already a very good
Right.
one that works. Like it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense unless like for some reason you need something very very specific, but otherwise like confetti, right? Like the confetti dropping on
Yeah.
something, like there's no reason to code that all out, just use the
No, it
package,
would
it's
take
easy.
way longer. And it's like, for what? For a simple animation.
It looks the
Um,
same regardless of
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I want to continue on like what Bryce has said in the comments here is like, you want to have a good understanding of certain functions like map and for each and others that are used in frameworks. And yes, so there's a few things that are used frequently in frameworks, such as, these methods like map and for each. There's some other things too, like JavaScript destructuring, right? Spread syntax. But
Arrow
again, these are,
functions.
yeah, arrow functions. Like, these are sort of basic, or maybe not like basic to mid-level understanding of JavaScript. So
But
once
there's
you
stuff you can look
understand,
up too. You can look it up on any,
totally,
you can look
yeah,
it up
yeah. And
anywhere.
and
You can get information, examples. It's easy. Yeah.
yeah, and so this is sort of where I would go next. Is we talked about HTML and CSS and then learning JavaScript. And I think if you go through like that JavaScript crash course book, you have all the knowledge you need to start working in a framework. And really the next thing is to get into a framework, because uh, building in these frameworks is going to reinforce all of this knowledge that you've already built on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because that's all you're going to be doing essentially.
Yeah.
So that would be the next thing, right? And I would recommend this is, if I was starting over now, I would probably learn uh, React and Next.js, right? And I recommend this. Like, this is hasn't changed for me or anything, but
They're the
they're the
number
most
one. They're
widely
the number
used.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second I might try to learn is like Remix, because it's sort of like a new player in the field. But again, like, React and Next.js are so prolific that if you want to find a job, you're going to find a lot of companies that are already built using Next or React. So you want to have experience in those. I would recommend like learning a little bit of React before Next.js, just so that you can see the difference and what React really brings to the table, so that you can see sort of how Next.js adds to that. But
Also,
either
when you
way,
learn something like Next.js too, these other frameworks, whether it's like Angular, whether it's
yeah,
whatever, they're going to be easier to learn anyway because they have the same level of abstraction. And I think
yeah,
that's the thing is like the frameworks, the difficult thing at first is just understanding how things are structured, why you're
yeah,
making these sort of choices that you're making. But you learn it very quickly once you start doing it. And I would add too that I think
yeah.
the most important thing at this point is just start building projects
That's
yourself
exactly what I was
from
just gonna
start to
say
finish.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, you can go on YouTube and look up tutorials for all these little different things, like what's this hook and what's that hook, and that's great. But like, just get a basic understanding of like what React is. So look up like a video that's just like, what is React, right? And what is Next.js? What are the differences? And then from there, I would literally just start building projects that are full stack, like Next.js app. And in the beginning, it's going to feel like way over your head, and that's okay. Just do
Yeah.
it. Just go through the motion of doing it. Just type what they type. Don't copy and paste the code. Actually type it. And as you're going through it, pause every like half hour and just try to understand like what you've done. And if you can't, that's okay. Like this is a great opportunity where you can also use AI, right? Like you have to start using these tools as a developer if you want to be like a competitive modern developer is you have to use AI. You have to use it to learn, you have to use it to build, you have to use it for everything. So ask it like what's going on in this React file, right? Or why
Explain
am I
it to me like I
using
was a 5-year-old, right? Like that's a great way
exactly,
to do
yeah.
this, right?
And so that's sort of where I would go is just start building. I would probably build 3 to 5 projects in React and Next. And then at that point, that's when I would start building my own. That's when I
Yeah.
would start with a passion project and just start piecing the passion project together using some of the projects that I've already built, right? That's one of the easiest ways to sort of learn from your own experience. And what I used to do a lot, which is like, hey, I want to set up auth. I did this before in a previous project. Let me go see how I did it, pull that code over if I need
That's a good
to.
idea too, because I do that too. But you also then get in the habit of refactoring the code that you've already written and
Yes.
re-examining it and modifying it, making it better. And I think this is all. That's really all you need to do is just start building then, and you'll be on your road, to where
Yeah.
you want to be.
And Bryce made a good point. He said, turn
Yes.
predictive text off in your editor. So if you're using like Copilot or turn that
Oh
stuff
God.
off because it's gets in the way and it actually slows down your learning because you don't have to think. You're just pressing tab to like fill in lines of code. So yeah, absolutely. And like we say this frequently inside the web dev incubator, but it's important to say here too, which is you're going to run into bugs and issues and errors, and that is good, right? That's when learning happens. So if you're just following tutorials and everything works perfectly every time, you're not actually learning anything. You're just
No.
copy and pasting. So you want to have those errors and you want to work through those errors as well. Um, so yeah, that's where I would go. And then like really from there, once you have an understanding of these frameworks like React or Next, that's when I think it's appropriate to start learning some backend code and understanding like databases, serverless functions, APIs, auth, things like that are sort of your next step. And then from there, you're just going to continue stacking skills on top of this. So understanding more frameworks, more libraries, more packages, different ways you can build design patterns, and then you can expand on languages from there as well. Do you guys agree? Do you have
Yeah.
anything else that you would
I
add to
think that's
that?
good.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
good.
Wrap it up.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'd love to hear what you guys think. If this was helpful for you, or if you would do anything different, drop it in the comments. Let us know what you would do if you were sort of starting over on your web development path this year. Hopefully, this helps you guys. If you are starting out, what to learn, you have a pretty good framework right now for what direction you can go. And if you are looking to get a slight advantage on your peers in your web development journey, you can
Major
certainly join us.
advantage.
What's that?
A major advantage,
It's a
not just a
major
slight one.
advantage. I like to downplay it, but it
Yeah.
is a major advantage. If you'd like to get that, you can join our web dev incubator. It is a private inner circle community where we meet twice a week to discuss all things web development. On Saturdays, we have a motivation and accountability call, which is what we're going to do right after this. And on Tuesdays, we do live code alongs together. We build projects together. We've been working on Danny's My Tasks app this week, which I think we should have pretty much finished up next week, and
Yeah.
we'll move on to something else. And then, of course, you have 24/7 access to us through a private Telegram group and all the other members inside of there. So if you ever have questions, we have a bunch of group members who recently are getting work now as web developers. So they're working with different clients. So we're helping them out with that. So if you just need a support group, some community to help you on your journey. You don't want to go through this alone. It's that much tougher. And I promise you, like, learning this stuff on your own is nearly impossible unless you're some sort of superhuman. So if you do want a great community of aspiring web developers who are super motivated, just like you can join our web dev incubator. Just head over to codenoobs.io and you'll see on that page all the ways that you can come hang out with us and join us. And of course, if you're up to it, feel free to send us a DM, tell us a little about yourself. We'd love to give you some free mentoring or just have a quick chat with you. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed our Saturday episode. We'll see you next Saturday for another episode here inside the Code Noobs Facebook group. If you're watching on YouTube, come join us over on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/Code Noobs. There's about 1,500 people over there waiting to say hello to you. So come hang out with the other developers inside the group. With that, if you are inside the Web Dev Incubator, we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Danny will send you over the link inside the Telegram group. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your Saturday, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.